Okay, we're live. Hello, this is Emily Bacon. Stop. We're off to a really good start. This is Emily Bacon, and this is the Olive Press. And today I am here with my mom, Willa Cahill. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I just got the fine print that this isn't going to be edited, so it could get ugly real fast.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably just knowing us. So, well, do you want to share a few things about yourself? It's like what is that? AA, an AA meeting. Hi, my name is Willa Cahill, and
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll start with that. My name is Willa Cahill.
Hi, Willa.
Thanks, and I'm not an alcoholic, though some days I feel like I should be. But anyways, 56, married, mother of 4. Originally from upstate New York, transplanted to Southern California because the winter of 77 was brutal. And then transplanted up here, thanks be to God, in 2002.
I thought it was 2003.
No, it was 2002, just after Eliana was born. She was 4 months old when we moved up.
Oh, that's right.
And up here is Hayden, Idaho.
Mm-hmm. Wait, so you moved up here because of the blizzard of 76?
Not here to Idaho, but we moved to Southern California because of the blizzard of 76.
Really?
Yeah. Dad and Mom were just like, that's it, we're done. Stick a fork in us. And Papa got a better job in Southern California. And
I didn't know that was the
they had 11
main
kids
catalyst
at the time.
For that.
It was one of the catalysts, but Southern California, they paid better. And it was a new opportunity for them in my dad's career.
So how did they feel going to because had they ever been to California prior to moving there, or
well, they lived in California after they were first married.
Oh, okay.
They lived in San Diego and Sacramento, and then they moved back to New York, and then from New York, after they lived there for years, made the change when they had 11 kids, and then had 2 more in California.
So did you guys drive to California?
We drove, from New York. But the company paid, so it was a long. There were 2 vehicles, 2 vans with all the kids in it, and the moving van, of course. But we drove, it was a long trip. We drove from New York down and went by the Arch and then to Texas and up to Arizona. And by the time we got to Arizona, Mom and Dad said, "Oh, come on out of the car and look at the Grand Canyon." The teenagers in the car said, "That's just a big hole in the ground. Get back in the car. Let's get to California." They were done. They wanted to be in California. But it was a culture shock because here we had the 4 seasons in New York.
Yeah.
While they were brutal seasons, they were seasons. And we were used to that. And so moving to Southern California the first few years, Christmas was very disappointing with palm trees and short weather. It was a culture shock moving from a acre and a half where we had forested area and we had a lot of area to play and roam to move into a development. So the whole time that we were moving, in the process of moving to California, our parents reminded us, okay, you're going to be living really close to your neighbors, so stop screaming, stop yelling, stop fighting so loud, because everybody can hear you.
Yeah.
So, and we had sidewalks for the first time, so we could learn to roller skate. So it was very different.
Interesting. So, who was the youngest then? Was it, what the heck was that? I think someone just slammed
Neighbor.
Their door. Who was the youngest then at the time when you guys moved? Was that Molly or?
No, Tim.
Tim? Oh,
Tim
okay.
was born in New York.
Tim. Oh, yeah,
He's
that's right.
number 11.
Tim, Liz, Michael. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And then Liz and Michael were born
in California.
Yeah.
So what was your parish like? Because this was after Vatican II had kind of
and that was the difficulty in New York. When we lived in New York, we went to parochial school for grade school, St. Mary of the Assumption. That was a parish that St. John Neumann had established in upstate New York, East Amherst area, Swarmville.
Wow.
It's still an active parish. It's still an active school. And my mother was battling the nuns all the time because they tried to say that Guardian angels didn't exist. They were
What?
saying a lot of heretical things in the high school that my sisters went to, and they were fighting this sex education coming into even the Catholic schools at that time. So we were kind of the odd people out. There was other families, a couple other families that were large, but they flew low under the radar. And we were always, in that tiny little area, everyone was related to everyone. And we were not related to anyone. And we didn't have any extended family in that area. And so we were the only people. We were like a little island. And so we tried to fit in, but it was a little bit difficult to fit in when you're a large family. And my parents were very conservative. That was a time when mini skirts were very popular. Polyester was big. And my mom was more traditional into the
Little
cotton.
House on the Prairie.
Oh, yeah, she made our clothes. She taught herself how to sew. And she was a homemaker. My dad canned. We didn't eat at McDonald's. We were more, my parents bought a side of beef, a side of pork. They would buy in bulk before buying in bulk was a Costco thing.
It kind of sounds like you guys were like crunchy. Have you ever heard that term?
Yeah.
Crunchy? Like crunchy before crunchy was a thing.
They were very good stewards of the one paycheck that Dad made. He was a professional engineer, and he always was constantly being educated in his field. He had 2 masters. I think it was 2, maybe even 3. He continually went to school, even into the 80s. Not 80 years old, but into the 1980s.
Yeah.
He was going to school to stay relevant because technology was changing so fast. He was in the Atlas program, part of the Atlas program, the space race. But he was a really devoted father. He really was. And there's a funny story about the space race and how he modeled his life after St. Joseph, and he was so dedicated to the family. My mom, too. They were just all about raising their children in a good Catholic environment and protecting them from the society ills that were going on. That was difficult because Vatican II happened, and can you imagine? I mean, seeing the culture, Vietnam happened. You look at Vatican II happening, even in your own church, there was massive changes.
Yeah.
And people took real liberties after Vatican II. And just seeing all the changes that were happening in society really kind of shook that generation. And so getting back to the funny story is during the space race, during the Atlas program, my dad worked at Bell Aerospace in upstate New York, and they had, I think by that time, 6 children. And so Dad used to drive home. I think it was like a 45-minute to an hour drive one way. He'd drive home, help my mom, feed the kids, bathe the kids, and get them ready for bed, and then he'd go back to work.
Wow.
Or if he was in school, that was after he graduated from college, because he had gone to Drexel, and then he took secondary school also.
And this is before you were born.
This was, I'm trying to remember. I was born in 1966. So I'm trying to remember when the landing was.
I wasn't. I wasn't there.
Anyway, I don't remember it, is the point. But anyway, so he came home for dinner, and he was helping my mom to feed one of the babies. And he was feeding the baby a bottle, and he heard the click, click, click noise. And he says, "Florence, what is that?" And she said, "Oh, well, that's in the bottle. It prevents air from getting into the baby's belly." Well, that was the big problem that we had in the space race to get to the moon. The Russians had a massive explosion because they had air in the line.
Oh.
So they lost a lot of their astronauts and their technology because of that explosion. And so Papa called the guys, come back to work, I got an answer. So he helped them and got in touch with the manufacturer who made the bottle, and they figured out how to apply that technology to the rocketry. So
wow. I knew that story, but I didn't know that it was so invested. So just It really
but if he wasn't dedicated
yeah.
to being a father and helping his wife with the children and the care and feeding of the children, he was not a hands-off father.
Right.
He would always take the old baby. Mom would take care of the new baby, and he always cleaned the house when she was going to have her babies, and so it wasn't perfect. Not, growing up in a family is never perfect.
Yeah.
There were a lot of traumas in the event. It was not perfect, but I maintained a unique relationship with my parents, in that I was a quiet and shy kid, so that meant I was portable. I was easy to take places.
Yeah.
Because I didn't touch things or ask for things, or,
You just kind of
get into stuff.
flowed with them.
Yeah, I just flowed with them. So I remember sitting in the back seat when we would go on Saturday mornings. We'd go to Mass at the Carmelite Monastery in Buffalo. And then afterwards we'd go to the docks, where they would go to, the restaurants used to go to these places, suppliers that have bulk potatoes, sweet potatoes, vegetables, cheese, different products that the restaurants would go to these providers, and so they'd go to get them, and they would buy for our family, and then they'd duplicate for the Carmelite monasteries.
Oh, wow.
So that they would donate. On Sunday we would go to benediction in the afternoon, and Papa would donate the produce
Yeah.
for the nuns.
Wow. And that must have, were they one of the primary donors for them out there, or was it like...
I don't know. I just know that they had a unique relationship with the nuns at the Carmelite Monastery in Buffalo, and they were very close to them, and they pray for us, did so many things for our family as far as spiritually.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're still praying for us.
I hope so.
But they sent Mom and Dad, they gave them a beautiful statue of Saint Teresa of Lisieux from the actual convent that she was from.
That is really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And then the
statue.
crucifix, they made a very large, beautiful crucifix
Yeah.
for my parents that is
Hand painted.
hand painted and everything, a little gruesome, but yeah.
Wow.
So, but that was from the Carmelite Monastery, and so they were an integral part. And I remember I think that's why I've retained my faith, is the time spent during benediction. Mm-hmm. I love the cadence of "Blessed be God, blessed be his holy name." I love that.
Yeah.
That just feeds my soul. And the nuns sang so beautifully, and they were cloister, so there was a iron grate on the side of the
grill,
altar,
I think is what they call it, yeah.
grill, where they had their pews that we couldn't see, and I'd always try to strain and see them because they were so beautiful. The sound that came out of that area of the church was so beautiful. And they had such peace. It seemed like a peaceful place.
Did you ever think
safe
about
place.
being a nun?
I thought about it. In fact, I had a little application I had found in Granny's paperwork that from when I was a kid that I had applied, put my name down that I was interested. I don't know whether that was more my parents wanting me to do that.
They hit it
But I did think about it. I did contemplate, but I always knew I wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to be a mom.
I'm glad you were.
Well, this is true.
Wouldn't be here.
This is true.
So did any of your siblings ever think of being a nun? Or religious at all, do you think?
No, I don't think so. No. I think the way that we were instructed in our faith, and my parents were really very strict, and daily rosary routine. When you're young, you don't understand that. And when you're the only person, that your parents are the only people who are saying, this is what you have to do, and they're telling you the truth, but you're going to a Catholic school and you're hearing falsehoods in the Catholic school. Your parents seem kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And I was too young. I didn't think my parents sounded crazy. I wasn't influenced by that. But some of my siblings thought, oh, they're just extreme. They're making up their own religion.
Which makes sense. I mean, you're being told these things from, what you would think would be a reputable source. And
you
then
would
hear
assume
it from your parents, and you're just like, that seems hokey.
Well, I went to Catholic school even in California. I went a couple of years to public school, and then I went seventh and eighth grade, and then got a scholarship to St. Bonaventure for my freshman year. And I was turned off by it at that time. And what turned me off is the nun took the Bible and threw it across the room.
By Catholicism? You were turned off of Catholicism?
Not Catholicism, but I thought, wow, this is disgusting. This is where the church is. And we heard so much garbage from the pulpit.
Yeah.
And every time we would go to Mass, there was a lecture in the car on the way home.
She threw a Bible across
She threw
the
a Bible, yeah, and said, I don't want you doing this. And it was just to be an example of, shock value with a teenager. It was just a stupid way to teach kids not to do something.
Yeah.
It's like punching someone in the face and saying, don't punch somebody in the face, okay?
Yeah.
I didn't need that. So I was a little scandalized by that. That's not her fault. It's her fault that she did that, but she's not the sole reason why I was disenchanted at the time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Catholicism. I never, ever felt like the Catholic Church teachings were wrong. I never did. And that's scary for me because I didn't always live a Catholic life. And the fact that I stepped away for a few years just because I was spiritually lazy
Yeah.
and not willing to conform to the guidelines of the Catholic Church, it wasn't that I didn't agree with them. I never thought it was wrong. That is what is a harsher judgment that awaits me for that. And I fear that.
But you obviously have regret about it, and you've gone to confession for it. And I think you just have to trust that God has forgiven you in confession,
I do trust that God does forgive me. I do, but I still feel the remorse.
Oh,
the remorse is there, and as I see my own children draw away and pull away, not you, of course, but as I see my own children not accepting the truths of the Catholic Church, and I think, well, that's a little bit of, what comes around goes around. You're going to reap what you sow, and because you were not faithful, everyone has a free will, and they make their choices. I just am a little surprised because growing up with as contentious as some of the teenagers in our family were, in the Pearson family, none of them refused to be confirmed.
That's really good.
None of them. They were all confirmed. Now, whether they were in the greatest spot when they were confirmed or, how many graces they got through it, we only know, and that's up to them. But I do say that the 4 that have passed away all died in the church. Yeah. They all died, and they had gone far, very far from the church. And yet, in the mercy of God, they came back, and they had the last rites, and that's a huge consolation for Granny, and I'm sure for Papa. If he were alive, he would be very consoled that at least the fruits of what the battles that they pursued to remain Catholic. And it's so hard post-Vatican II being in the Novus Ordo Mass instead of the traditional rite, because we weren't in a traditional rite parish in New York or in California.
Yeah.
And some of the homilies, I won't even call it a sermon because that was not. Some of the homilies that were from the pulpit were, I can remember a time my parents we would always sit in the front row.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want distractions. And so I can remember a time when they got us up, we walked out. After the homily was done, we went back in, stayed for the communion, and then a letter was sent to the priest.
Wow. To
correct some of the fallacies that they were peddling. So I look at my parents and how courageous they were. But first and foremost, they were formed beautifully in the faith. Very beautifully. Granny went to convent school, and Papa had very good education in Philadelphia.
So because his parents were Catholic, right?
They were, yes.
Okay, so how was he formed? Like, was it their parish that was really good?
And the school.
Oh, did
I
he
think
go
it
to
was
a Catholic
called
school?
North Northeastern. It was a big Catholic school, like one of the biggest Catholic schools in the country.
Wow. Okay.
And people who weren't even Catholic sent their kids there because it was a really excellent school.
Just the education was
Education by the priest was astounding. It was very good.
Wow.
Very, very good education. So that when he was 17, he got accepted at Drexel for engineering. So that'll tell you. It was a very good school.
Yeah.
And Jewish people sent their kids there. Agnostics sent their kids there. It didn't matter who you were.
Dang.
You wanted to get into that school because it was a good school.
Yeah.
Now, Granny went to convent schools, a couple of different convent schools, and her parents were not practicing Catholics.
Yeah, they were Catholic, but more by name and not really by choice.
But they did return to the church before they died.
Oh, they did? That's
They
really
did.
good. Wow.
Yeah. My uncle took him to Mass and got him back going to Mass,
And
which is
they-
a beautiful thing.
Oh, Uncle.
Bud.
Oh, okay. So Granny's brother.
Mm-hmm.
So when. Okay, so they owned a restaurant in Philadelphia. Do you know what it was called? What it was called?
No.
Oh, okay.
And Papa, my mom's father was an artist, self-taught artist, and he had a gallery in
wow.
Philadelphia, but it burned down.
Oh man,
So,
really?
yeah, he was more a creative type. He worked for Stetson for a while and the electric company, but he was not the main breadwinner. And during that time, his wife was the breadwinner in the family. She owned the restaurants, worked the 16-hour days, and that time she had to have him sign all the loans, all the paychecks, everything. So it was a little humiliating that she did all the work.
And he had to have his name
She
on it.
had to still defer in humility
Yeah.
to him because the laws were such that women couldn't have their own business and they weren't able to sign the paychecks and things like that. The contracts
Wow.
had to be in the man's name. That I know that's part of the reason she was so angry. She was not happy. She was more of a
Not getting the credit.
feminist.
Oh, I see. So did they keep the restaurant for the rest of their lives, or like how did that? Do you know?
No, I don't know. They retired. She closed the restaurant. They had
Oh, okay.
at one time lived over the restaurant, and
Wow.
you know.
I'd be curious to see where it was located. Like, I wonder where it is in Philadelphia. I mean, I don't necessarily have a desire to visit Philadelphia, but I think that if I did, it would be cool to be able to know where it was.
It used to be a soda fountain, like in a pharmacy.
Oh,
And so she worked there. My grandmother worked there, and she earned the money, and the guy sold it to her.
wow.
And so she turned it into a restaurant. And they also bought one in Florida. My grandfather had one in Florida that was really, really old restaurant. But my grandmother wasn't interested in pouring a lot of money into that
Granny's
restaurant.
dad owned a restaurant.
Yes, he
in
was
Florida?
trying to. Yes, he wanted to venture into that because he saw his wife doing it. He thought, well, let's expand because they wintered down in Florida as they got older.
Oh, do kind of like
So,
a chain.
Yes.
Oh,
so
interesting.
not really a chain because the one was a diner. The one in Philadelphia was a diner.
Oh, okay.
But the one in Florida was like a historic restaurant, like
Oh.
400 years old.
Oh my gosh.
But it needed a lot of
Renovations.
renovations and a lot of money. They can be a money pit, a real
yeah.
money pit. So, but anyways, that's
Wow.
so Granny was raised by the nuns for the most part. She was not raised by her mother, and so she didn't have that connection, a motherly connection. And so to me, it was amazing how when she had her children, when Granny and Papa got married, my mom and dad got married, they didn't think she would be able to have children because she had very high fevers and pyelonephritis when she was a child. So they told her, you're probably going to have to adopt. I don't know whether the fevers, they figured cooked her eggs or what, but anyways, so they figured, well, we'll adopt. And on their honeymoon, she got pregnant, and she's like, I feel sick, and I think I have a virus. And my dad said, you're pregnant, basically.
Yeah.
So she had a virus all the time. She was pregnant quite a bit. She was very fertile, thanks be to God. But she did not know how to do anything when she got married.
Yeah.
She didn't know how to cook. She knew how to greet the Pope or dignitaries because the people who went to that school were moneyed people. very much money. They were from Poland and different parts of
The Pope
the
didn't
world.
go there, did he?
No, he never went there.
okay.
But they taught them because it was assumed that they were going to marry well into society, and so they might have an audience with the Pope. I mean,
That'd be cool.
that's a practical thing for a person in that arena. But so she self-taught. She taught herself how to sew. She would take apart clothes that were donated to her, recycle the buttons. So my parents, out of necessity, because they had the one paycheck and they were very conservative with their money, they would recycle before recycling was mandated. They would recycle everything and repurpose everything.
Yeah.
They were green before green became a thing. And so she learned how to cook. She learned how to sew. And I still remember her heartbeat, sitting on her lap and hearing her heartbeat. So I'm fortunate that I had that. I wasn't nursed as a child. I was one of the few in the middle. There was a few in the middle that were bottle fed because things were a little chaotic at that time. But
was it formula or was it?
yeah, formula.
Oh, well,
I survived it.
I don't feel bad about giving Gianna
No.
formula or Finnegan.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were formula fed.
Yep.
I don't see that you have any issues, so that's good.
No. But anyways, I'm grateful that she learned how to nurture. And sometimes I can see in areas that she had a hard time with it.
Yeah.
And she was stretched very thin because Dad was gone a lot. And she didn't have any support, like friends, very much. She didn't have her family. Her family was, and Dad's family were totally unsupportive of them having large family.
Why do you think that is? Because you're on Papa's side, they were good Catholics, so why do you think
but
that they were?
they also, my grandfather was the head mechanic of the Navy Yard in Camden, like in the Philadelphia. He was also a self-made man, and they had 5 boys, and they kind of micromanaged the ones that lived there, which was 4 of the boys stayed in the Philadelphia, New Jersey area, and they kind of micromanaged their life.
Yeah.
And that was a time when birth control was really becoming very popular, and people in the church, you could find a priest who would say, yeah, sure, why not? So,
Well, because they thought they were going to change the...
they assumed that the church was going to sway and buckle under popular demand.
Yeah.
And so people just figured, okay, we're just going to go with it. Ahead of the time. We're ahead of
Wow.
our time. So I'll never forget, Granny told me one of her neighbors, the ladies, confessed her and says, Florence, I have an IUD. And so that night she was praying. She told my dad, oh, we have to pray for her because she's got an IUD. And he looks at my mom and she's like, she's very sick. She thought it was an illness, like a UTI. She didn't know what it was. But when Dad explained it to her, what an IUD was, she's like, I don't know the science behind it, but I know that that's wrong. You can't go against what God has ordained
Yeah.
and not expect a cause and effect. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's pretty funny, though, that she... I mean, obviously she didn't know what an IUD was. She had 13 kids, but wow. That's... And that was before IUDs... I mean, I don't know the science behind it either, but I'm sure it was a lot more hokey than it is now.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot of
the
injuries.
70s or the 80s?
60s.
That was the 60s? Oh, my gosh. Well, have you ever seen that picture of the baby that was delivered holding an IUD?
No.
I'll have to show it to you afterwards. There's this baby. It obviously didn't, work. I'm not saying it was a bad thing that this baby was born, but the baby came out holding the IUD. That
Seriously.
It was crazy. Yeah.
Put that up in Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Well-
No, I saw it in my biology class when I went to school in Santa Barbara. There was a baby in a jar
Oh.
that had it was born with an IUD in it. It was terrible.
What?
Yeah. It didn't survive the birth. It was a miscarriage.
Why
But
would they even put it in a... Why would they put it in a jar? That's disgusting.
People are disgusting. What can you say?
Ew. With it... Ew. And what parent would, donate their baby to be like...
People don't know. They don't know any better.
Ugh.
And if you donate your baby to science, or maybe in those days they didn't know that the baby was going to science. They might not have known.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
So, aside from that fact, what did you do in school? And, like, where did you go to school?
Went to school first in Santa Barbara, and then went to Long Beach City College in the LPN program, and in the last semester broke my leg and had to restart it. And
How'd you break your leg? I know this, but it's
I was hit by a
story.
car. I was hit by a car. That I always know when universal precautions in healthcare was instituted. Universal precautions was in relation to HIV. Because in the 80s, HIV was just like hitting the world like COVID hit the world. So they instituted in the medical fields universal precautions where you treat everyone as if they may be infected.
Which is
Because
good.
that's the way it's not discrimination. So the day I went to, that morning, I went to a class at the hospital that I worked at. And I'm sitting there and talking to this lady there, one of the nurses who was there. And on my way home, some lady stopping to get a donut hit me with her car. I was on my bike, and I was taken by ambulance back to the hospital where I worked. And the nurse who I was sitting next to said, "Wait a minute, you were just sitting next to me. What's your deal?" So it was pretty funny. So
I like hearing that story because every time you tell it, you're like, I got hit by a car. Like, just very nonchalantly. Like,
well, I survived it, and it was not as devastating as my friend who had passed away 2 weeks before,
oh.
being hit by a car.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you had told me about that.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So I had a broken leg, but I survived it, and it was,
yeah.
I was fine.
What year
So
was that again?
That was in 86.
Okay.
And then from there, I took what I learned in the nursing program and went into utilization review and medical case management. I actually worked at Hoag Hospital down in Newport Beach in the business office. And then when I met Daddy, his mom worked for Cost Care, which was a utilization review company. And she got me a job working there. And then I worked for a different company that was...
Had you been dating Dad when she got you that job, or did you know
Yeah.
her prior to... Oh, okay.
Yeah. It just so happened that it was one of the bigger employers in the area.
Oh, cool.
It was a good employer, and it was nice to work with her. She's so fun.
And you met Dad in 88.
88.
Okay.
Yeah. After I broke my leg. I think it was in 87, actually. October 21st, 87 was when I broke my leg.
So that kind of affected you meeting Dad. Like, do you think you would have met him if you had continued the nursing program?
Probably not.
Wow.
Probably not.
God's pretty providential in that.
Yeah. There's a few things that wouldn't have happened. So I was living with my friend in an apartment complex in Westminster. And now I look at it in hindsight, that was the scariest place to live. There were skinheads and perverts living there who would watch us go to our car. And I mean, it was just terrible. It was a really dangerous area. There were helicopters, police helicopters flying over all the time, and a lot of police there because, you know, wasn't a good, safe area.
Weren't there like crackheads too?
Yes,
in
who
their,
were the
like-
managers of the apartment complex. Yeah, they were dealing drugs out of the rental office.
What?
So some little kid gets a wild hair and throws a toy car through our kitchen window. And I did not feel safe because our neighbor who lived across from us, across the way, upstairs, came to our door and propositioned me in the middle of the night. And I felt terrified. And I notified the rental manager. And then the car goes through our window. And they just...
Propositioned you. What does that mean?
you know what it means. He wanted me to have fun
Oh,
with him.
oh,
Yeah.
oh, oh.
He was a pig. He was an animal. Anyways, so I notified the management that I didn't feel safe. And then the car goes through the window and they just put up a board thinking that's sufficient.
What the
And I'm like,
hell?
no. So my roommate's like, she quickly looked at the rentals in the area and found a house. So when we found that house, it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom rental house in Midway City.
How much was your rent?
I think it was like 900 something between the three of us.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And it was a great house. It had a granny flat in the back and a little fire pit between the granny flat and the house.
Wow.
Anyways, we took hefty bags and just bagged everything. We didn't care what it was, glasses, everything. We threw them in hefty bags, rented a truck, moving truck, and got out of that apartment that day.
Oh my gosh.
That was it. We signed the papers. We got out of there. So the guy who lived in the granny flat behind the rental house that we lived in called Sean's brother and said some chicks moved in. So they
Who
came
was
over.
it that lived in that?
Just a friend, Jim.
Oh, okay.
He was friends with Uncle Chris. And so the guys came over, and it was August was my roommate's birthday. Mm-hmm. So we had a birthday party, a barbecue, and we invited the neighbor guy and some of our friends and everything. And we just started up a friendship. And then by that December, Daddy and I were an item.
Yay. Mm-hmm. And now the rest is history.
History, yep.
Dang. Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that about that disgusting apartment. Like, I remember you telling me that the crackheads had, like, really long pinky fingernails so they could, like, line up the...
Oh, though, that was in Santa Barbara.
Oh, this is a different place?
Yeah.
Wait, you lived in 2 different places with crackheads?
It wasn't crack, it was cocaine at the time in Santa Barbara. There were a bunch of... I didn't know why. I had no idea why my neighbors all had long pinky... The guys. I'm like, what's up with them? That they have a long pinky nail. And my friend said, oh, that's so they can snort cocaine. And I got out of Santa Barbara at a really, really good time because I had just made friends through work and school who were in the fast track. And they were, even back then, into weird buy stuff and lots of drugs, and they were dangerous, and I felt like my guardian angel was protecting me.
Yeah.
And I got out of there and went and lived with Auntie Rosemary for a while till I could get on my feet and get established.
So when you were you kind of practicing at the time, like, or
in Santa Barbara,
or just in general, like during this time between, high school and getting married?
I would pray, but not really. But it was so weird because my roommate in Santa Barbara, I must have set out a vibe or something. Because my roommate had hidden under the dresser. I was cleaning up one day, and she had tarot cards and, like, sorcery crap underneath the dresser. And I'm like, well, wow, that's something to find when you're cleaning the room. So that, thank God I got out of that place.
Did she do that on purpose to, like...
She hid them. She hid them from me. And so I don't know whether there was something that she understood that was taboo for me.
Oh, I see.
It was taboo for me. She would not have practiced that in front of me. So, yeah, there were a lot of things that I saw. And when I went to the church, I went one time, I was trying to go to confession up in Santa Barbara. And when I showed up, they were having like a group confession.
Oh.
The college students were sitting with the priest and folding chairs in a circle, and they were confessing the ills of the world, like nuclear war and
sounds like
ecology,
an actual, like,
and
AA meeting.
It wasn't confession. I thought I was gonna get on the line. I was gonna go in confessional, and I was gonna say, "Bless me, Father. This is what I did this weekend, or since my last confession."
Yeah.
And it wasn't that. It was a group type of, that was the first time I encountered a group type of confession setting. And I kind of saw these people. I knew them. They were from the neighborhood, and I knew that they weren't confessing the sins that I saw them doing. I thought, this seems kind of hokey. This didn't. So that's not a valid excuse to not practice my faith, but that just didn't seem like the brand of Catholicism that I wanted to partake in.
And that you were raised with, too.
No, not at all. It was totally the hippy-dippy stuff.
Yeah.
So then when I moved in with Rosemary and Akira, they were so gracious and had me move in with them. And she got me a job working with her friend and in his optometrist office. Mm-hmm. And they had such a beautiful routine in their family. They taught me what a healthy family could be. Mm-hmm. And they the joy, the routine, and there is something to be said about a routine in a family.
Yeah.
And so their Saturdays were, they had their chores and everything, and then Sunday we went to mass, and then we went to breakfast sometimes, and I was just enfolded in the safety of their family. And I will always be grateful that during a very pivotal time in my transitioning from being under my parents' wings to total freedom, and then learning responsibility of who I should be as a person, they helped to form me a lot.
So do you feel that, how old were you when this happened, when you lived with them? You were 20, right?
I was 19 or 20.
19?
20,
Okay.
around 20.
So,
Yeah, because between Santa Barbara and living with Auntie Rose, I went back to Philadelphia to take care of my grandparents before they died.
oh,
For
that's
about
right.
6 weeks.
Okay. So do you feel that you ever wanted to live with Granny and Papa again, or did you?
No.
Okay.
It's kind of like when you move out of the house and you taste your freedom and being able to make your own decisions. You can never go back under the authority again.
Yeah, that
It's
was
very
hard
difficult.
when I moved back with you guys those couple of times. I mean, and you guys didn't ever encroach on my independence or anything, but it just felt kind of like a failure a little bit, you know, because I was like, I was doing okay, I was paying my rent, you know, and it wasn't for like a long term, other than when I moved in with you guys before we got married. It wasn't really long term, but no. I get that. Like it would have been hard, I think.
It was just to get on your feet. And you know, Daddy and I, we have always been a safe haven for our family members who needed a safe place to stay.
Right.
We did it for several of my brothers and sisters. They stayed with us for a while.
Yeah.
And then once they got on their feet, they were able to move on.
I think that's the biggest charitable act you can do is like open up your home to someone. I'm not saying like just open up your home to just anybody, you know, but I'm just saying like it's really, really helpful, I think, when you have someone join your family for even just a little while, because you're opening up the most intimate part of your life. You know, your home is your safe haven. So,
But it also opens you up to criticism.
yeah, that's
Because
true.
I can't count the number of people who have stayed with us who have come back and made harsh criticisms of
How we live.
how we live, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
everyone has an opinion how they can do it better. And it's like, really? Hey, you're homeless, so how are you going to do that better?
Well, and I mean, it's interesting having my own home now, and you know, going from your guys' place to my place, and I mean, your place is cleaner than mine right now.
We don't have babies.
True, I know, but now I understand like why our home was often in chaos, not to the point where it was like detrimental to us, but like it was always messy, you know, and now I understand like, oh wow, okay, it's really hard to like actually maintain a home.
It is. And Granny always taught me, she said, you know, people are not going to remember if you had a perfect home. They're going to remember whether you were a good mom.
Yeah.
And you could do both, but it's very difficult. And I was not organized. I was not organized at all. I wasn't raised in organization.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that I was very skilled. I'm very organized at work. I'm good at multitasking, excellent at multitasking. But keeping a really neat and clean house, fastidious house,
Yeah.
has even, ironically, how I moved to college in Santa Barbara was house cleaning.
Oh.
I saved my money working as a house cleaner. I wouldn't advertise that now because people would have fired me if they looked at my house and said, oh, you were the house cleaner? No.
I remember you and I used to go clean houses together.
Yeah.
What was it, like maybe once a month, twice a month, something like that. And you became allergic to cats.
It wasn't the cats, it was the chemicals that I had to clean with.
Oh,
the
I
bathroom
thought-
bubbles.
'cause the cats
and the
were-
cat hair. It was so much cat hair and dog hair, and then
Yeah.
all of the chemicals, mixture of chemicals. It would take me a half hour to clean my lungs from
Yeah.
it. But it was yucky.
Yeah.
But anyway,
was
I'm
kind of-
really good at cleaning other people's houses.
Yeah.
not so good cleaning my own.
It was kind of interesting seeing other people's houses, like seeing how they lived, you know, and like seeing the inside. And those houses were nice houses too. Like,
Of course.
they were beautiful.
If they could afford a housekeeper, of course.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. But oh, the AC just turned on.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's just gonna be on the recording.
Why.
That's
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows that we're doing this in my apartment, so there's going to be noise, I guess.
Yeah.
So now that you have 2 kids out of the house, Emmett's going to be a senior next year, like, how do you feel looking back on all of it?
Well, I was an older mom. I was 31 when I had you. So, and when I lived in Santa Barbara, I had a cyst on my ovary and had a artery wrapped around my fallopian tube, like a little rogue artery. I didn't know that, but I almost died, so they had to do surgery. And so I was working with half a factory, so I felt pretty amazed that I was able to have children, even because my first pregnancy was a miscarriage before you, and then I had one after you, and then 2 after Ella. Yeah. So 50% of my pregnancies wound up in miscarriage, which is pretty bad odds.
Yeah.
It's devastating, and it's something that people don't talk about. They expect you to get over it. I heard this from someone. How long is it going to take for you to get over that? I actually heard someone say that. Wow. And this is somebody who was an OB nurse. So I thought, wow, I know it's routine for an OB nurse to see people miscarry and things like that, but it's personal. It's a loss. Yeah. It's a tragic loss, and you feel it keenly. And that was the only time in my life where I ever questioned whether my joy would ever return.
Wow.
I went into such a dark hole of grief and sorrow that I felt, and it was so bad. And I thought, is this ever going to get back? Because I'm a really joyous person. I think I got an extra helping of joy.
I think so too. Yeah.
And so, but that was a tough one. And so I did. And then, believe it or not, a month later, I got pregnant again and miscarried that baby also. But that was a pivotal time after I had that. I was 46 at that time. And it was very risky even to have children at that time. And I was at Granny and Papa's house walking and exercising, and I was just like, what am I going to do now that my kids are getting older, and Eliana needed braces, and we started having mounting debt, and we were always coming from behind on one paycheck. It was very difficult, and we always made it. By the grace of God, we always made it paycheck to paycheck, but it was a struggle. And I saw some very serious things that we needed, like Eliana needing braces and things like that, we needed a little extra income. And I was so devastated by the miscarriage. I was walking to try and get healthy. And I thought, what is the next chapter of my life going to be? Yeah. Now that I can't have children.
This was after the final miscarriage?
Yes.
Okay.
Which was, I was 3 months pregnant when that happened. So that was really devastating. And so it was like I heard an audible voice in my head. I don't have hallucinations and I don't have schizophrenia, thanks be to God. But it was like, Willa, calm down. God knows your skills and your talents and what you're capable of. And don't worry about it, because whatever you need to do, it'll be there. There will be a job for you. Because I had been out of medical case management for 17 years, having kids.
So before we get into that, do you want to talk a little more, like, obviously you don't have to, but for moms that have had miscarriages, like, what would be your advice bouncing back from that?
Take care of yourself. Physically, spiritually, and mentally. Take care of yourself and reach out. I think as a friend, reach out, or sister, a loved one of a person who has miscarried a baby. Just listen and accept that they are in grief. And it's real tangible. It's very I remember going to church, and Father Casavante made an announcement when I had the last miscarriage, and he said, please pray for the Cahills. They lost a baby. And one of the parishioners came up to me and said, what baby did you lose? Like, kind of brashly. And I said, oh, I miscarried. And they're, oh, well, that makes a difference.
What?
It was really bizarre. Anyways, yes. And yes, it does make a difference whether you've held the baby, whether you've nursed the baby, but you've also lost the potential of that.
And there was
nurturing.
a soul.
And there was a soul. And in the one disservice that we do in society is we do not reach out to these mothers who have lost babies in the womb from miscarriage, whatever it is, abortion, whatever it is that you have lost a baby. It is a soul that you mourn and you've lost. And you've lost that potential of who that person was. And we had a name picked out for each of our babies when I was pregnant.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
What
yeah,
are
I
the
had
names
names.
that you had?
I had Evelyn, Allegius, Elliot, and Elizabeth. I had names picked out. E-names. I did the E-names.
Yeah.
But, you lose the thought of that baby and who they would be.
Yeah.
And I think just listening, make a meal for them, just be their comfort and be an ear and lift them out of it. And amazingly, I was so blessed because Auntie Lisa was pregnant every time I was. And when I miscarried those 2 times, Lisa was pregnant with Malia at the time. And I am so grateful. I never felt like every time I look at Malia, I think, my God, my baby would be that age. I never think like how some people would be jealous.
Yeah.
Or, hurt by it. I never think that because in hindsight, a year less than a year after I miscarried, Dad died. My dad died. And if I had had a newborn, there's no way I could have helped Mom to get off that mountain because she needed me to physically move her.
Right.
And so I got myself physically in shape and emotionally and every other way in shape for that next battle of losing Papa. And if I had a new baby, I couldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But the 4 babies that I lost, I asked them to pray for their siblings who did make it to live here on earth. I asked them, please spiritually pray for your sisters and brothers so that we can all be united in eternity again.
I could feel that too. I think that they do advocate for us. Now, I know there's like debate in the Catholic Church about, whether babies that aren't baptized go to heaven, or if they are in limbo. They don't have any specific teaching about it as far as I know. I like to subscribe to the idea that they do go to heaven because they didn't have an opportunity to be baptized. So it would more be like a baptism of desire in my mind. But also,
I don't know.
You think about the Holy Innocents too. They went to heaven. They're considered
They
saints.
did, but they had lived also. But they weren't baptized. I don't know. I like to think that the intention was there for them to be baptized. If they had followed the natural course from conception to birth into childhood, they would have been baptized in our family.
Yeah.
I don't know what the theology is on whether miscarried babies go to heaven. I'm not going to get into a debate about that.
That would take for a long. That would be
Just
a
for
long time.
comfort for my soul. I asked them to pray wherever they are, because I know they were a soul
Right.
that was created. I asked them to pray for my children, their
Yeah.
siblings.
I remember when those miscarriages happened, because I think I was 12. 12 or
It really
13.
affected Eliana a lot. She was very
Yeah.
crushed by that.
Yeah. Me too. I remember being really excited to have another sibling, and it was kind of interesting because whenever you would have a baby, I'd be like, oh, this is new. Like it just felt interesting because it was like a whole new dynamic, into our family. And every time it was happy, but it was just kind of like, oh, who's this kid? Like just this new little creature in our family. But I remember being really disappointed, because I loved being a sister. It was hard,
Yeah.
but I was disappointed by it. But, looking back too, it would have affected so much.
I know.
Not that it's a good thing, of course not, but
No, but you see
God's hand in it.
Yes.
And there's actually, I was listening to a podcast. There was a therapist, and he was saying it's pretty common that moms sometimes feel relief, when it happens. Not because they're like, not because they were happy that they lost their baby, but sometimes it's like in the back of your mind, you're just like, I'm kind of relieved because we have all these things going on, like financially we can't handle another baby, or like,
oh, I never felt that way.
Yeah, I'm not saying you are, but some
but
people do,
never did.
But that's a valid, like,
yeah.
I'm trying to, for all the moms that have ever felt that, like, that's a valid thing to feel, and it's not something that is malicious. It's just like, as humans, it's hard for us to, I guess, adjust.
Well, they may have sensed too that there may have been something wrong with the baby or with their own health. Yeah. Because I was very sick with all my pregnancies, but in particular with the last two. I was very, very sick with them. So I suspected I wasn't carrying. They always told me, oh, well, if you're feeling sick, that's a good sign. If you're throwing up, that means the baby will keep.
Yeah.
Not necessarily if you're very sick.
Yeah.
And I was toxic. I was very, very sick.
Like you were going septic, or?
Well, the baby I was 14, about 14 weeks is what I thought I was, but it looked like when they did the ultrasound, the baby had passed at 8 weeks. So I had carried that baby that long, and you can go septic. And I was getting sick. I was getting very ill from it.
Wow.
So.
Yeah.
But
I've never had a miscarriage before. I was always afraid that I would. With Gianna, I was like deathly afraid of that. Just because it was so new, I didn't know what to expect with the pregnancy. But with Finnegan, it was interesting because we had just gone through that whole experience with Gianna. And then when we found out we were pregnant, I was terrified. Like,
yeah,
so scared. And I was in therapy, and I was like, if I miscarry, it might be a relief. Not that I'd be happy about it, but and that's not to say like I'm unhappy that Finnegan's here. Like, are you kidding me right now?
No, but you've got a very unique situation with your health history.
I can't imagine my life without Finnegan, but at the time I was kind of like, I was doing, I was coping with the fact that I was probably going to end up having another episode, which I did, but I was like, I was terrified of it, trying to go through that trauma. And I was just like, I mean, if I miscarried, I don't think I'd be as sad as if it was like the first time I'd ever been pregnant,
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I don't want to be pregnant or that I wasn't happy to be pregnant. I was just scared.
Oh, pregnancy is a terrifying time.
Yeah. And
because
on top
you have
of
another human inside of you relying on you completely.
And on top of having that trauma from 4 months prior, I mean.
Yeah, well, you were slammed back to back.
Yeah.
You didn't have any recover time from the first trauma that you went through.
My body's still like recovering from all of it. I mean, I can see it and I mean that, I think that's with a lot of moms too that have kids back to back to back like that. I mean, realistically, I was pregnant for like 2 years.
Well, think about Granny, how many times she was pregnant.
I know.
I was blessed in a sense that I had spacing between my kids.
Do you feel it was easier to have them spaced, or do you feel like it was?
I don't. Because it was like you were an only child. Each time I had a child, I acted like you were an only child. Like, oh, this is my last child. I felt so blessed to have been able to have a baby come to fruition, to be born safely and healthily. And I figured, this is my last, so I treated you like you were the last, and you got a lot of attention. Each of you got a lot of attention, but it spread out the whole motherhood aspect from 31 years old, which was my first pregnancy, to when I had Ella at 42 years old. And with 4 children, that's pretty widespread.
So do you feel that your parenting has changed since parenting like Eliana and I to Emmett and Ella? Like, how do you feel that your parenting has changed?
We're a lot older. Daddy and I are older. We're kind of beat up. I've had so much in my life that has kind of beat me down with the helping Granny to survive after Papa, and helping to bury my brothers and sisters who have passed away, and being in the trenches with all of the trauma that's happened with my mom and her children needing to be buried and things like that. We're kind of worn out. We're tired, and we're still fighting, and we still have the same standards. But I think we're not as strict as we used to be. Discipline is really hard. It's really, really hard. We had rules. We were pretty strict. When you were little, we were really pretty strict. We were strict about what you could watch.
Yeah.
And it was easier because we had more control. As you become teenagers and as we got older, we don't have the knowledge that you guys have with technology. And we've done what we can to protect the kids with putting up barriers with the technology and monitoring and things like that. But kids are smart and they get around it.
Yeah.
And they disobey. Kids disobey. They have a free will. And it's very hard to accept that your kids have a free will, and you know that some of the choices that they make are going to be harmful in the long run, and you know that. And
how do you deal with that? Like, as you see it unfolding, how do you deal with kind of taking a step back and just like kind of letting it unfold? Does that make sense? Like you see it unfolding, you see it's going to be detrimental, and you know, obviously tell them don't do that, but they continue to. Like, how do you deal with that as it's happening?
Well, Father Irwin, God rest his soul, gave me very good advice. He gave Daddy and I good advice because we sought his guidance in some areas in our life as far as parenting. And he said, you say it once as your kids get older. You say it once and you tell them. And then they have to deal with the consequences. And if it's not going to harm them physically in those ways, then, you know, you have to allow them to suffer consequences. And you just pray for them. You have to pray for them. You can guide them, be there to listen, and don't allow them too much freedom to make bad choices. You know, if you're not present emotionally in every other way, and convey your disappointment when they make those decisions. I think kids don't want to disappoint their parents. More so than anything, I think when you say, I'm very disappointed, that really resonates with kids. I mean, have you heard that from me?
Yeah. That was a big catalyst, like when I was in high school. And you'd see my grades and you're like, I'm very disappointed. That would hit me harder than if you were like, I'm so angry at you, you know. And you wouldn't say that you're angry at me very often, but I really wanted to, like, when I would get bad grades, I would be more worried about disappointing you rather than like my own future with that grade or whatever. Like that. And I think that's for a lot of kids too. I think that they are scared of disappointing their parents rather than not getting into a good college or whatever. Because you guys are like, as you're growing, parents are like God almost, in a sense, you know, like,
oh, that's scary for Daddy and I.
Well, I mean, it's true. Like your kids look up to you.
We have the authority of God.
Yeah, but your kids look up to you and like they think that you're perfect, you know.
Yeah,
and so
far from it, but I do think that as far as with Emma and Ella being at home, we don't yell as much as we did. Only, you know, yelling down to talk to them because the house is big and they're downstairs. But it's not as contentious as when everyone was at home. And I don't know whether that was because of the time. Because when you guys were in your teen years, that's when a lot of the stuff hit with the siblings passing away and stuff like that. And that was a very stressful time for us. But we were never really super strict about grades.
No.
We never expected you to get straight A's. We expected you to apply yourself, do your homework, turn it in. That's all I ask. Yeah. And that's the challenge that I have with Ella at home right now, is she doesn't feel motivated to do her homework. And the school system, in a certain sense, they failed. I mean, I feel that's one of my biggest failures, I feel, is that I didn't do what a lot of the other parents doing, and that's homeschooling their kids. I tried it with you and Eliana. I did try it, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I don't know whether it was the timing. I don't know whether it was our temperament, my temperament and the kids' temperament. I just felt like I wasn't capable of successfully being in it. I teach you guys every day certain things and life lessons. We communicate all the time. From the time you were babies. I never dumbed down goo goo gaga. That's why you were able to know your alphabet by the time you were 2. That's why you were able to converse so well when you were a child. We never dumbed things down. We always talked about relevant issues that are going on in the world.
Right.
There was no topic that was taboo or off subject. We really did try to have an open dialogue with our kids.
Well, and that's why I felt comfortable telling you, if something was bothering me at school, like when we were reading Brave New World in high school, I told you about that, and you're like, no, you're not reading that. And I'm glad that you said that, because that is a dirty, dirty book, but...
Well, and nowadays that's charter, so we knew what was going on. Charter was pretty, and you were very forthcoming to tell me. M&L aren't going to tell me any of the CRT and crap that they're learning in the public school now.
Well, and it's
they're not
mainstream
going to tell
now
me anything.
to do... have you seen some of the... there's a book that they just put out that is literally like I don't know if there's kids listening to this, but like illustrated the stuff.
Yeah, I know.
And that's for 5th graders, and then there are these teachers that are touting it as this revolutionary book, and it's like, no, you're literally just giving your kids.
Yeah, I know. I know, it's disgusting.
But
the one thing I have to say that I did that pretty well, I would say, parents beat themselves up a lot, lot. We're our biggest critics, or we're our biggest canonizers. We think we're saints, some of us. I don't put myself in that category. I was a struggling parent, but the one thing I was is on duty.
Yeah,
I was there. I was present. I was in the schools. They owned me. I volunteered. I was there present all the time. I knew your teacher. As soon as you went into high school, that changed. That dynamic changed. And I'm sorry that Ella didn't survive charter, because I knew that Ella right now.
Oh, STEM
charter. I'm sorry that she didn't buy into it and really see her education and the value of her education. She more wanted the social experiment of Lake City.
I kind of understand, like, maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but I kind of understand why she wanted it, because realistically, I went to charter and I didn't really do anything with that education. I didn't go to college, and I more benefit, I think, from the social aspect of high school. Like, when I was doing volleyball, like, I look back on that a lot more fondly than when I was in biology class or whatever, or doing 5 hours of homework.
That's natural. But I think the biggest thing I pray for is my children to make good friends. Yeah. And sadly, you were the only one who made Catholic friends. The only one. The other kids, Emmett has a few friends, or a friend that's Catholic. But for the most part, they don't have Catholic friends. And if you don't have somebody who is checking you and saying, hey, let's say a prayer or something, or at least following along. Now, my first roommate, or one of my roommates, was Catholic too. We went to grade school, or middle school, Catholic middle school together, and we weren't really a good influence on each other. But if you do have good Catholic friends, they can kind of do the checks and balance and kind of keep you in the lane, heading towards eternity, towards heaven.
I say that about my roommates, the Egan's.
They were good girls.
They're probably listening.
They're really good girls.
They literally kept me Catholic. Like, I don't think I would have stayed Catholic if I hadn't moved in with them, because it was at a time where I was still trying to get that back, after not praying for so long, and just being really kind of lukewarm about it. It's not that I ever claimed anathema of Catholicism ever. I was Catholic, but And I always felt like a connection with it, but I just didn't really feel, like very invested in it. If that
I
makes
think
sense.
there's a point in your life and you get confirmed. I was confirmed, I think, at 14 or 15 years old. And I was oblivious to the meaning of the whole confirmation, even though I was instructed in it. I didn't feel like there was a huge impact in my life at the time.
Right.
But as an adult, there were times and circumstances that I felt like the Holy Spirit did help me, and that the information that I was given when I was taught about the Catholic faith by Granny and Papa, and even in school, was very helpful. Because there were, when I moved out on my own and I started to turn towards the Catholic Church and identify as a Catholic, the attack started immediately from my friends and neighbors who were praying for my conversion to Protestantism.
Yeah.
And they attacked me very blatantly. And it was just astounding to me. And then some of the answers, the bigoted things that they would say about Catholics, I would be like, where'd you get that? Because that's not what we believe and that's not what we do. It's at one point, I just finally figured, okay, you know what? My Catholicism is more important than my friendship to you, sadly. I mean, if you're going to retain that bigoted feeling,
Yeah.
then move along.
Wow.
I love you and I'll pray for you. Move
Yeah.
along. I can't do it. I mean, I just feel like there are some people who are very stubborn in their wrongness. And the truth of the Catholic Church resonated with me. I never questioned, and I wasn't a cafeteria Catholic that felt like, oh, well, I'm going to take this part of it and agree with it, and I'm going to take that part and agree with it.
Right.
Once I was in it, I was whole enchilada.
So do you feel that, I'm trying to think of how I had it in my brain and then it went. Okay, well, so in that kind of same vein, going from being in the Novus Ordo church to, well, not church, but going from the Novus Ordo rite, the English rite, to the Latin rite, how was that transition? I mean, because here, I want to just say, from my perspective at least, when we did that, I mean, it was kind of unnatural, but I feel better for it, for sure.
It was unnatural, you said?
It felt unnatural.
To go to the tradition?
Yeah, because so when we were going to St. Thomas, we were involved in the choir, and Eliana and I sang in the choir all the time, and these songs, they were in English. We did some that were in Latin, of course, like Panis Angelicus, but it was going from a church, like a rite that we understood, and I knew the entire mass, and then going to a rite that I didn't know about, and so I feel for these, and like I didn't even know what they were saying, of course, and so I feel for these people that are just starting to go to the traditional Latin mass, because they're experiencing a culture shock.
It seems so foreign to me because I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know about, I mean, I heard Granny and Papa talk about it, but I hadn't been to a Latin mass in my youth. I didn't know about it. Granny and Papa went. They came and moved up here and went to St. George when it was at St. George.
Did you not go to Latin mass when you were young because it wasn't available?
It wasn't available.
Okay.
No, it wasn't available in New York or Camarillo. I signed a petition when I lived in California to get the Tridentine Mass at the mission in Ventura.
Oh.
So they did. They did bring the Tridentine, but it was very difficult to find a Latin Mass. Spanish Mass, yes. Latin Mass, no. So my dad and mom went to St. Joan of Arc before it was St. Joan of Arc.
I remember when Papa told me, he was like,
yes,
guess
when they
what
decided to name it
Yeah,
St.
he
Joan
was like,
of Arc.
guess what it's going to be named? And I was like, what? He's like, St. Joan of Arc. And that was, she was my favorite saint at the time. So I was like, yes.
So I think there's a history that this area doesn't know. And a lot of the newcomers are not aware of this. And they should really say prayers for Father Rassley. Father Rassley, after Vatican II, he was a Redemptorist priest at St. Thomas and in the area, up in this North Idaho area, because he filled in for a lot of other priests. But he was instrumental in keeping the Latin Mass going in this community. And he held that torch. And then until the fraternity came in and Father Irwin was instrumental. So there was a history of priests that had a yearning for the Latin Mass. And my parents, they talked about the Latin Mass, and we were entrenched into St. Thomas because I taught religious education at one point, and you kids were baptized and had your first communions there. We had funerals there. We were known. We were connected with the St. Thomas community. We had friends there. It was part of our community. And so we started going to the Latin Mass. I started going, and there was a sermon that was said, and this was after 9/11. It was, no, when was it? There was a sermon that was said at St. Thomas, and the priest had said, you should welcome your Muslim brothers and sisters, welcome them into your home for dinner. And that's true. We should always be welcoming to anyone, but he never once mentioned praying for their conversion. And I forget how it went, but Dad, Sean, your dad, he was like, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to be praying for the conversion of people who consider us infidels?
Yeah.
And want to lop off our head and blow up our buildings? Shouldn't we be praying for their conversion? Not just trying to understand why they feel the way that they do about Christianity.
Right.
But we should be really trying to help them to come to the truth. And so he said, that's it. And then we had gone to see Father Ripperger was there at the time. And Father Ripperger was doing a 4-session sermon on moral law.
Oh, it was moral law.
It was moral law.
I thought it was the life of a person, like from life to death.
Nope, it was moral law.
Oh.
He had 4 different weekly sermons that he did moral law. And we went to the first one, and Daddy said, okay, this is our parish now.
Yeah.
And he had to make that decision. I would go to Mass during the week with Granny and Papa, and people were like, who is this girl, because I didn't have a veil. I did wear a dress because I wore a dress, but people questioned who I was and why I was there because I didn't fit the mold of a traditional, a tratty. Well, I was not a tratty. And that term tratty really kind of grinds on me. I hate that term.
I don't like that term either.
It seems like a clique, and I'm never about cliques.
They call it a rad trad now, like
radical traditionalist.
Yeah, and that's more like talking about. I think that's more in alignment with like maybe people in the SSPX or like the one that's even, I don't even remember what it's called.
That are further right than we are.
Yeah, but
there's always going to be somebody further right or further left than you. So
yeah.
But the thing that I felt, it was very hard to break into St. Joan of Arc and be accepted.
Yeah.
I felt always judged. I very much felt judged. And I felt like the kids felt like they were judged. If they weren't wearing the right thing or saying the right thing, or because I came from Novus Ordo, that you don't know anything about your faith. And, there were things that, and here's the thing, I probably perceived some of what people were saying and thinking, but who cares?
I felt like that.
Who cares?
I worked hard to actually like be
you
involved
really
in
did.
the community.
I was really proud of you for that. But that's what turned off my other children.
Yeah.
From being confirmed. They did not want to get confirmed because they felt like they were totally judged, and because they went to public school, that they were considered an anathema and that they were not to be associated with.
Well,
and there's kind of a I don't think that they mean to, but they're doing what they can to protect their kids from worldly children. And my kids are good kids, but they know about the world.
Well, yeah. And I mean, so do I. I mean, I was more sheltered than the kids were, or the kids are. But I think, for anybody listening, it's so important to open up your hearts to kids that might not seem, to fit the perfect mold, because your kid, I'm not saying like throw your kids to the wolves or anything. I'm just saying like, I feel like maybe Emmett and Ella, if they had like actual good friends in their life that stuck around, they might have maybe
That were Catholic.
They might have
Yeah.
had the motivation to stay. And I mean, and again, I'm not saying, you know, expose your kids on purpose, you know, to these kids, but like obviously don't just claim that these kids that are going to public school or whatever are completely toxic. You know, there's a lot of good kids that are going to public school because they, you know, their parents can't homeschool them, or their parents can't be home with them.
But
you
I
know.
do understand the protecting of your kids.
No, I do
get
too.
it,
I do
'cause
too. But
there's some kids that I wouldn't want my kids hanging out with.
and but I do think another thing too is we have to be welcoming, you know, because I mean, if you walk into, I felt when I first started going to St. Joan of Arc, I felt so ostracized, and I wasn't a bad kid, you know.
Yeah.
I wasn't a weird kid. I mean, I was weird, you know,
Yeah.
but I wasn't like getting into weird stuff or anything. And I still felt ostracized, and it was hurtful because I was trying to go and worship God, and I wanted to have a community that would help with that. And one thing that helped was Father Nolan, his youth group, you know. I really
yeah.
appreciated that. That helped me kind of get a niche, you know, but it took a lot of work, and I feel for people that are working hard to be part of this community, and it's sad to see, you know.
And when teenagers have social anxiety to begin
On
with,
top
and
of
then,
it, yeah.
and then you feel like or perceive that other people don't accept you or anything, it's very,
Right.
very difficult.
And so it's just important. I think we have to understand, especially now. And I mean, a lot has changed even just within 5 years, 10 years. You know, I mean, you're going to be exposed to people that do not agree with your lifestyle in any capacity. Like,
Yeah.
your kids are always going to be exposed to other kids in other types of families, you know, like families that have their kids in public school, families that aren't Catholic, you know, it's just inevitable.
I just see that the way that I was raised, and I did it by my sophomore through senior year, went to public school. I see with raising you children, I had you in Catholic school, I homeschooled you, and I also did the public school.
Public
so I've
school
seen
was-
every single thing.
Public school is better than Catholic school.
Well, I could explain to you.
Yeah.
In a Catholic school, when the kids were acting like they were heathens and hellions, and they were cruel, they were mean.
Yeah,
I couldn't understand, and I couldn't explain to you, well, that kid doesn't have the Jesus in their heart, the love of Jesus in their heart. I couldn't explain that. But if we were going to the public school and the kid acted really mean, and they didn't act like they were Christian and didn't behave in a manner that they'd be abused you or something, well, maybe they don't have the love of Jesus in their heart. You have to have sympathy and pray for them.
Yeah.
You can explain that a little better than going to a Catholic school and having the kids bully you. You can't explain that, and you can't fix it. And I did fight with the principal constantly about that. And
Seems like a generational thing.
yeah,
I mean,
but the
I don't
one
think
thing,
we'll have to fight for Gianna and Finnegan. 'Cause
I
we're
hope not, because
homeschooling them.
I'll be there and I'll, Anyway, you've seen me. But the reality is, and I've heard this, and this is the one thing that I very much fought when I went to the traditional rite. I felt wrong all the time.
Yeah.
I felt scrupulous, and I felt wrong, and I knew that was the Mass of the Martyrs. I knew that was the Mass of the Martyrs. That was the Mass that people died for. It wasn't the Kumbaya masses with the guitars going on. But I have to say this. The traditional rite has not cornered the market on holiness. And there are Christians that I have met, Catholics in my life, and Christians, that are the holiest people that I know. And they are more of a witness of Christ and his charity and his mercy and his truth. And I've seen it it's very interesting in this area, and I explained it to some of the priests. With working with the Mary House when it was here, that was a crisis pregnancy home here in town through Maggie's place. We had Pius X on Haycraft, which is considered the more left than the traditional Catholic.
Yeah.
That Pius X, all the way to the Pius X SSPX in this area. So we have the spectrum of Pius X, so to say. And there are holy people in every single church in that whole spectrum.
Yeah.
And we can't say that one is the holiest church.
Weren't there
We are
Protestants
one.
also that were helping the Mary House?
Yes, there were.
Yeah.
But the Catholic Church is one holy apostolic church. And we have to really work towards that and stop the infighting. And that would start with our Pope.
Now, the SSPX, just to clarify, they're not in alignment with Rome. So obviously, they're not part of the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church.
No, I understand that.
I just wanted to
they're
clarify
not
that for
in
the listeners.
community with Rome.
I understand what you're saying.
But there's still very good and holy people who go there.
Oh,
They
yeah.
just don't recognize
Right.
Rome.
Right.
And right now that's hard to do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say we've got to pray for our Pope and some of the things that are said, and I'm certainly not allowed to criticize our Pope.
And if we pray for our Pope as much as we criticize him, he'd be a saint.
Well, you have to think about how the media portrays anyone who is trying to do good.
Yeah.
And who represents anything Christian. And so I think there's some validity in some of the things that the Pope has been criticized for saying and doing. Mm-hmm. And then also I think that the media, which I believe is owned by the devil, also magnifies things and distorts the truth also. But I do pray for the Pope because I wouldn't want that job.
No.
When I saw him the first moment when he came out on that balcony, he looked like a deer in the headlights.
I'm sure. I mean,
and first thing he asked was for people to pray for him.
I can't even imagine the pressure that you have, especially from like world powers. Even though the Pope is not necessarily a world power like in the medieval times, he still is a figurehead.
He's an authority figure.
Right. And that's another thing too that I think is important. Even though we're not figureheads, we're still billboards for Catholicism.
That's a scary thing.
Isn't it? And so we have to, and so I think about this a lot of times where I'm at Mass. I mean, I don't think about it during Mass. I shouldn't. You shouldn't think about anything other than Mass. But you think about, what if an atheist walked in and just wanted to see a Latin Mass? And he saw all these people praying. Like, what would you want them to see? Would you want them to see joyous people? Yeah, I think so. I think I'd want to, if I was an atheist and I went into a church, I'd want to see people that looked happy with their lives. Because if I was going to subscribe to something and like completely change my life for it, I'd want to see people that had hope, especially in such a hopeless world.
You can't necessarily judge that from a pew, but I will say this. When you walk into St. Joan of Arc, that is otherworldly.
It's true.
That is otherworldly. That there is something that is special about that parish, and it's special about this area. And I do think that this area goes back to the Native Americans with the Coeur d'Alene tribe desiring the big prayer. And I think their desire and their seeking the big prayer in the Mass, I think that has anointed this area with many graces and blessings. That's why we have St. Joan of Arc here, and that's also why I believe we have the Carmelites here that pray for us. But when you go into St. Joan of Arc, the silence, and it really is silence. It's beautiful. It's different than any other church, and people are behaved. They're dressed beautifully, appropriately. There's a sense of reverence and the sacred when you walk in there.
That's true.
And even though there's large families, they all manage to dress them beautifully. They all manage to have them behave. I mean, no family is perfect, but they are representing what they feel is a Catholic ideal. And you walk into that and they're countercultural. This is not the world. When you go into that parish to a Mass, it's like the world stopped.
Well, and I feel home. I feel like
I do
I'm
too.
home.
And I feel like the world out there is not in there.
Yeah.
And so you feel like almost like a safe harbor. And
that's what Mass is
I
meant
did
to
feel
be.
that way when Father Mosier was at St. Thomas. I felt that way because I loved how he spoke the truth from the pulpit. That was beautiful. And the new priest, they'll get there. They will get there. I do believe
they're beautiful
they'll
priests.
get there. They are.
I
Their
do really
faith is
appreciate
beautiful.
them, and I mean, I think that Nigerian priests are beautiful, you know, because
I do. I
they
love them.
are fighting to the death in Nigeria for.
I know.
I mean, that's incredible that St. Thomas has these priests that
They can give us a different perspective
Yeah.
of martyrdom in their own country when they go back to visit their family.
right.
They're if they're wearing their garb, they're marked.
Yeah.
So, but I am grateful because Saint Joan of Arc was very instrumental in helping our family
Yeah.
and helping our marriage and having right order in the family. That
Having
for
dad
sure.
having dad
Be
switch.
head of household.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was a crazy shift because I remember when you guys had that conversation with us because you were kind of the one wearing the pants, you know, in the marriage, and you were the disciplinary, you know, like you kind of had everything on your shoulders, and then all of a sudden dad's stepping up and we're like, what's going on? You know, it was crazy. And I was in 7th grade, I think, when that happened. So I could feel it more palpably. Like I could feel, you know, I could feel it becoming right, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense. Like you can kind of feel it spiritually, you know, if you're really like tuned into it. And I'm not saying I was like extremely tuned into spirituality or anything, but even if you're just like a little bit connected, you can feel it when it shifts kind of. And I could totally feel when dad started taking that initiative, when dad got off his anxiety meds, when dad started to really come into the head of the household role, I felt that things were being ordered properly, and it was causing more harmony in our family, I think. But it also brought a lot of attacks.
Of course, but I think that was Father Ripperger. I mean, he said, okay, if you're better at the bills, if the wife is better at the bills, do the bills. You just do what your talent is. You know, it's not so much that.
Oh, just to clarify, Father Ripperger was not attacking us.
No.
It sounded
no.
like that for a sec. No, we had a lot of spiritual attacks.
Yeah,
when
we
that
did.
happened.
But it was very important that I step down and take a more humble role in allowing him and trusting and letting him be head of household. So you guys would come to me for, you know, can I get this? Can I do that? Ask your father. And that wasn't to throw him under the bus. It was to try to train you. We're a team, but you ask your father. He's the final head of the decision.
Was that a relief to you, or was that harder?
It was a big trust leap.
Yeah.
I had to let go of control. And I've learned in life I have no control.
Did you feel relieved to let go of some of that, though, and like give some of the burden to dad? Or did you feel like it was more stressful to have that transition? Like, do you feel like you were less stressed when you had control of everything, or more stressed?
You know, no, it was a definite shift. It was a getting used to it.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the first time I had to get used to a shift. When I had become pregnant with you, I had been working. I was the primary breadwinner. We were both working, and the company that I worked for went bankrupt. And so suddenly I had this excellent income that was gone. And then I found out I was pregnant with you 2 weeks later. So I had to adjust to being from a professional to being a mother. And mothers are treated like they're nothing.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have an income. And so
That's why I started this podcast.
yeah, so it was suddenly I went from getting respect from people in the industry and things like that to suddenly being a nobody to a certain extent. So that was a shift. And so this was a different type of shift in that I had to trust that he was going to step up and make the right decisions. And even when he made wrong decisions, I had to live with it. And I
So-
couldn't undermine him.
Yeah.
And the big ones I just had to accept that and pray for him to have the wisdom and the ability. And he's done a really good job.
Yeah.
He has really done a good job.
It's
He's
amazing,
a wonderful
actually.
he's a wonderful father and husband.
I'd never
I
want
mean,
anybody else to be my dad.
Just wonderful. I mean, he set the bar really high for you kids.
Oh, well, I mean, I remember when I was getting to the point where I was old enough to get married. You know, I was like, I'd pray, please give me a combination of Papa and Dad.
Yeah.
You know, because they were so amazing, you know, and Dad is just awesome.
I think the shift happened also more so when Dad died. My dad
Papa,
died.
yeah.
When Papa died, your dad told Granny, don't worry, you can be part of the Cahill family. We'll take care of you. And he stepped up. And I really think my dad would be so proud
Oh, yeah.
of him in that he alleviated my mom's fears.
I see
And
Papa
he
and
has
him a
stepped
lot.
up, and I couldn't have gone out of the fence of the Cahill family to help with all of the things that had happened in the Pearson family, and help Granny to bury the three children that had passed since Papa died. I couldn't have done that if your dad wasn't home manning the fort.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always there. And it was very difficult for him. It was
Yeah.
a sacrifice for him, and it impacted him greatly. But he's always been, since Dad died, he's been very steadfast.
Yeah. I've noticed
stepping
that too.
up.
And I mean, he's such a good influence on Emmett, and I mean, with Finnegan too. I mean, Finnegan's not old enough to really understand, but I'm grateful that my son has really good male figures in his life.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
and I
really
mean, Teddy
important.
is just amazing. I got exactly what I
is.
prayed for.
You did?
He's so much like Dad and so much like Papa.
Yeah.
It's
he's
kind
a
of incredible,
combination.
actually. Yeah, but no, I do see that with Dad. Like he, I can't imagine the pressure of taking that initiative, you know. And I mean, I just can't imagine. And getting off your anxiety meds. I mean, I'm on anxiety meds.
Well,
you know,
and
that must
at a
have been
time when
crazy.
anxiety would have been really high
Yeah.
with all of the things that had
Right.
happened in our life. It was
Right.
very challenging.
So he's really gonna get a lot of graces for that, I think.
Yeah.
For trying his best to make it right, and he did. I mean, he's really stepped up a lot, and I mean that was 10 years ago, but you can still feel the effects to today. It's
Well, and he's the one who said, okay, we're going to have rosary time, 7:00 every night. And that went on for a while. It went on for a few years.
that's a big deal.
And then Emmett and Ella refused.
Mm.
They refused. And so we get up at 5 in the morning, 5:30, and we say our rosary. And so it's being said, and he has taken the spiritual leadership of the family and is trying very hard to guide them. Despite what they're trying to do, he's trying to keep them on the narrow path.
One thing that I see with listening to priests and, you know, people that have had that experience of leaving Catholicism, they always like left when they were in their teens and when they were like in their early adulthood, you know, and I mean, you're in the world, you're trying to figure out what you want to do, who you want to be, you know, and some of these people didn't come back until they were in their 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
You know, so I
it's
see
amazing.
Emmett and Ella and, you know, kind of their obstinance about it, but I have hope for them because you guys have done so much work to raise us Catholic.
Well, and also to raise you with joy and loving God.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is the joy, realizing that there is suffering, but there's also joy.
But
and
you could
I want
teach
our house
that.
to be a safe place.
You can teach joy, but it's a person's choice to feel that or not.
It is. It's absolutely. But that was what attracted me to Daddy, was the joy.
Yeah.
So
He's
always
kinda like-
makes me laugh.
Dad's like Santa Claus.
Yeah, he's wonderful. But I remember when I was a teenager, when I was Ella's age, I was a little bit older. I think I was about 17. And there was a lot of contention that had happened in our house with the teenagers and things like that, rebellion. But I remember having, and I was not spiritually where I should have been, even though I had been confirmed. I was just, just surviving. And I remember having a dream about the Blessed Mother coming to our house to visit Granny, my mom. And I remember in my dream seeing Mom open the door. The doorbell rang. Mom opens the door and she's bathed in sunlight. And her face is just radiant, my mom. She's like, hello, come here, oh, and it was the Blessed Mother at the door.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't see her.
Yeah.
All I saw was this light, and Mom is just bathed in light. And I'm like, and I was downstairs in the dining room near the stairs. And I knew the Blessed Mother was out there, and I was not in any spiritual shape that I should be around the Blessed Mother. And so I snuck by while Mom's greeting her, and I snuck by and ran up the stairs and went into my bedroom in my dream. And I'm closing the door, and just as it's closing, the Blessed Mother's hand pushes it open. And I didn't see her face or anything. She just envelops me in her arms, and I'm weeping, just weeping. And I'm crying on her, and she's taller than me. I reach like to her chin, just above her chin. And my tears are on the wool of her garment. And I can smell the salt of my tears, and she's just calming, not even a word, just petting me. And I just felt such remorse for my sinfulness, but the mercy and love that she had for me. And I've always, sometimes whenever I feel like tepid, because you get into these dry periods, and I think sometimes those little dreams that you have, or the feelings that you have about that, we're not entitled to any consolation for sure in our suffering, but I think God mercifully gives you a little nugget to keep you, okay, it's okay, I love you, here's evidence.
Yeah.
And I get that all the time at work. My baby Jesus miracles that are like the big now joke at work. I get the consolations because I pray to Jesus to help me to help people.
Well, explain that. Explain what the baby Jesus miracles are.
Well, I work for a hospital that has very sick people, and so I have to find placement for them because we're not a long-term facility. We're a step from the acute care hospital to in between the skilled nursing or wherever else they need to be. And healthcare is such a mess that's a very big challenge.
Yeah.
And COVID made it a worse challenge. So at Christmas time, I put up my nativity. We decorated our offices, and I had my nativity out. And so I had the baby Jesus in my drawer because it wasn't Christmas yet, and I couldn't put him in the manger yet. But we needed a very big miracle for placement for somebody who desperately needed it. And we'd been working on it. My coworker had been working on it diligently for months. And so I took Jesus out of the drawer and I kissed him and I said, Jesus, baby Jesus, we need a big miracle even if we don't deserve it. And I put him in the manger, and 20 minutes later we got a call that we found placement in Montana.
That's so crazy.
And so I was so excited, and I said to my coworker, you did a great job, but I have to give baby Jesus credit because 20 minutes ago I put him in that manger and I kissed him. And so I said, I'm leaving him out. I'm leaving him out all year round. He is on my desk with the Blessed Mother, and I have a Sacred Heart picture that was given to me from a lady at another facility, and I keep that above my desk, and it's my touch tone so that I know I'm working for him, and I'm trying to help the most vulnerable people. And I have used that baby Jesus. I kiss him all the time. Give me a baby Jesus miracle. So it's now kind of a little bit of that. And I tell people, you know, he can go to your desk if you need a baby Jesus miracle. He did travel.
The traveling baby Jesus.
Yeah, well, the Sacred Heart picture that I have above my desk, I had loaned that out to people who had needed it. One of my friends that I worked with at another facility, her niece came to stay with her to die. She was dying. And she didn't have her Sacred Heart, and she really wanted it. And I said, oh, take mine. Just take mine. And so that Sacred Heart picture stayed with her until she died. And I've had very sick and dying people at my facility. And so I asked them, would you like a Sacred Heart image in your room? So Jesus goes on tour. So, and I have the distinct privilege of getting a priest for people as they are sick and dying, if they're receptive to it, and provided I can get a priest, because it's a challenge now.
Do you ever think about all the people that you've probably saved their souls by having a priest come in? I mean, you've told me...
I don't think I've saved them. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just an instrument.
An instrument in that. Like, do you feel that God is giving you graces because of that?
Not necessarily. I mean, of course he probably is, but I think whoever that person is who I've gotten a priest, that person must be extraordinarily loved by God,
Yeah.
Somebody is praying, whether it's them or somebody in their lineage, has prayed for them to have access to a priest, which is very difficult now, particularly during COVID. It was darn near impossible, actually. And so I pray for final perseverance. That's my biggest prayer now, and access to a priest in my final time. Because so many people don't know that it's important to
That's
have
why
a priest.
it's so important to pray for your family members, but also for the holy souls in purgatory.
Yeah.
Because I bet that they intercede a lot as well.
But my peers that I work with, that I have worked with in case management, none of them have ever. They didn't even. One lady, social worker I worked with, said, "What is a Protestant?"
I don't think I could keep a straight face.
I was very nice. I'm like, "You mean a Protestant? Oh, well, that's this." And of course, that was lecture number 1032. But I even people don't understand when you ask for a priest. Would you like a priest, particularly in this area?
Yeah.
That could be a myriad of things, because the Immaculate Conception people will not accept any other priest other than their priest. And so you really have to know who that person is who's requesting a priest, and get the spiritual help that they need. And that's regardless of whether it's a Catholic or a Protestant or non-denominational. There's that you have to respect that they need the help, the spiritual help that they choose.
So for anybody that's listening that is in healthcare or in a similar situation as you, how can they be instrumental in getting a priest to a patient? Like what are the steps that you should do?
Well, first off, you have to, sometimes there's a chaplain. Like St. Pius, I believe that Father Len is the chaplain for Kootenai for their facility. So they dialed in as far as that is concerned. But we're a little unicorn facility. We're a different LTAC, long-term acute care. So a lot of people don't know about us in Post Falls. And so we kind of fall through the cracks to some extent. And I've tried very hard to be able to have a priest assigned as a chaplain to our facility. But I've had to default and use St. Joan of Arc quite a bit because it's been challenging.
Yeah.
So please pray for people to have access to a priest.
And final perseverance for people too.
And really, seriously, know your act of contrition and your spiritual communion.
Yeah.
Because never before did I ever think that the churches would be closed. And when you guys were little, Mom's friend Marcella gave me 100 cards that had the spiritual communion prayer on it. And I taped it to my steering wheel on the van.
I remember
And
that.
I would say it in the car every morning when I was dropping you guys off at school.
Yeah.
We would say our morning prayers and our spiritual communion, because I felt it was very important that you know that prayer, because you can say it all day long.
I still know it.
Yeah, it's important. It should be as important as the rosary to you.
Well, and also, actually, even more so, honestly. I mean, they each have their own purpose, but,
Yeah.
I mean, you're receiving the graces of receiving communion without going to communion. And that's especially helpful for moms that are staying home with their kids. That has brought me a lot of consolation, being with the kids during RSV season,
Yeah.
And especially during COVID, I remember when my roommates and I would have a few people over, like they had the what was it again? Like 12 people, something like that. They had the restrictions of how, anyway, we didn't really care, but we had people over and we'd watch mass.
Yeah.
And they'd have the spiritual communion. I wouldn't even need to read it. I knew what it was, but it felt so isolating to have to be home and have to use that, because, there's nothing that will ever live up to receiving our Lord in person.
No. But I think that it was necessary for it to be taken away to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It was devastating. The fact that our bishops caved and allowed the government to dictate that the Walmarts could be open, but the churches could be closed. That was pretty diabolical to me.
Well,
and the rippling effect of having people away from the sacraments, we don't even see the full impact of that, and we will see it for decades to come.
Right. But I think that it enlivened people too, because they realized how important it was. And I think I feel kind of honored actually to be living during this time. Not because, it's some amazing time of peace. No, quite the opposite. But there is a special grace that God has, I think, given us in this time to be I'm trying to think of how to describe it, like to persevere through this. Because you think about, I was talking to Teddy about this one time, where it's like God has put you in the time that he felt you would be most efficacious. And so you might think that Saint Francis of Assisi might not have been efficacious during this time.
Well, I will say that when they closed the churches, we were very blessed that benevolent people paid to have the technology for us to have it live streamed.
Right.
And if it had happened 10, 15 years before, we probably wouldn't have had that technology available to us.
Right. The
so
timing
that
is of the
we
essence.
are blessed in that regard, that at least we were able to see the Mass.
But you think about how some saints that lived during their times might have not thrived here. They might have not been the great saints that God made them during their time. And so he's calling us to be great saints too, or just saints in general. You don't necessarily have to be canonized to be a saint, of course, but he's calling us to do the same.
Well, I think right now, and I don't know because I didn't live when St. Francis of Assisi was alive, but I think right now it is, since in my lifetime seeing things and seeing how society has changed so much, I think that COVID escalated and expedited the end goal of the globalist.
Yeah.
I believe that the end goal is the annihilation of the family, the annihilation of life, and euthanasia. I could go into all the things that I believe is the design of what the devil is. I'm not some intellect or anything like that, but I just see it. And I've seen in healthcare, you don't have to legislate euthanasia to legalize it. All you have to do is limit people's access to healthcare, either financially or by resources. And that's happening every day. And so people will die in the absence of treatment.
I was scared about that with when I had my TTP. They were starting to turn people away for not necessarily elective surgeries, but they were very picky about it. And so I was scared I wouldn't get treatment if I ended up relapsing.
Yeah.
Well,
and there's some people who had cancer that didn't get their treatment.
Yeah.
And that was a very realistic thing, because COVID became the sacred cow of an illness that affected everything.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that mess.
We could go on for hours about that.
We could go on for hours, but I do think that right now, the truth is very obvious.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious to me. It doesn't seem very hidden. And so, I don't know whether it's obvious to everyone, but I think right now in our lives, we have to make choices. We have to decide. And I used to say this when you kids were little. I'm sure you remember it.
Yeah.
Who signs your paycheck? At the end of the day, who signs your paycheck? Did you work for Jesus or did you work for the devil?
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. You have to do your Ignatius review at the end of the day and figure out, okay, where did I fail? Which we're all going to fail, and we fail a lot. And where did I improve?
Right.
And that's, I think, where the hope comes in, is if you make any incremental improvements in yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's as simple as controlling what you put in your mouth and what comes out of it. That's my big prayer this year, is to control what I put in my mouth so that I'm healthier, and what comes out so it's not as harmful.
Yeah.
And for healing for the sins that I've done in the past. Yeah. To myself and others.
And that's, I think, the beauty of being Catholic, is we're constantly working on ourselves. Something that Father Nolan said that was really prominent was, this is not, the Catholic Church is not a place for saints. It's for sick people.
Jesus said that too, when the Pharisees were complaining
that
he was having dinner with tax collectors.
Yeah.
It was like they need a physician, you know.
Right.
So they need a healer.
And it's important that we understand, you know, we're not perfect, and confession is there. I mean, they have confession before Mass and throughout the week, you know, and I think that's, I actually really love confession.
I do too. If it's done right, you can really make it into your therapy.
Yeah.
You got to schedule a time though. And I do recommend a general confession too, periodically, because if you have sins in the past that haunt you and that you feel like, oh, or things come up that you're like, well, I'm not sure if I confess that. Just if you're in a regular line of confession, they don't have time for that. So I've recommended, like, to some of my brothers who had struggled with stuff, I said, schedule a time and just talk to the priest and do a general confession. This is who I am, this is what I did, and this is what I'm remorseful for.
And they're not there to
judge you. And it may take,
you.
No, that's the beauty of confession,
Yeah.
is that it's the purest form of therapy, because you're forgiven, you have the answers on how to fix it.
Yeah.
And you're given the medicine and the grace to do it.
I think one of my favorite confessions that, I have two confession stories. The first, Father Eichmann, I love his confessions, because at the end he says, thank you for giving me the honor of hearing your confession.
I thought I was the only person he thanked.
Sorry.
I'm not special.
But it was amazing, because I went in there and I was just like, oh, I was dreading it, you know, because you dread it. I mean, you can love confession, but you always dread it because you're like, oh, I have to deal with the ugliness of myself, you know.
Yeah.
But then he said that, and I'm like, oh, I feel better. You know, like, it felt like getting a thorn out of my hand, you know.
He's wonderful that
way. He is. He's great. Yeah. And, but my favorite confession story was when I was like 7 years old. You remember this story? And this is actually the first and only time that I made Father Rappaport like boisterously laugh, which I'm like, I got a gold sticker for that in my book, because I'm like,
so
he never does that. Yeah. So, okay. So I was like 7. It was my second confession ever in my life. And it was Father Rassley. And Father Rassley, like, he was very instrumental in bringing the Latin Mass, but he was this crotchety dude. He was great, though. Like,
he was wheelchair bound, and he was older, and he was relying on other people for care. But
he was so funny. Like, he was so deadpan, you know? Like, he wouldn't laugh very often, but he had this voice like this, you know? Yeah. And anyway, so I was this little 7-year-old, and I went in, and I was saying my little 7-year-old sins, like I hit my sister, you know, or I disobeyed my mom, and and he was like, hurry up, kid, there's real sinners in line. I was like, okay, I'm all done. And he like gave me absolution. Like, I was traumatized. I was like, why? But I still went back, you know. But it was so funny, because I became friends with him later in life, you know, when I was, well, later in life as in 6th grade, when I'd volunteer for the soup kitchen. He would come, and he would
you'd save him a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Even though he had diabetes and wounds.
I know, he shouldn't have had that. I didn't know what that was, though, and like the people that worked there, they knew. They still gave it to him, though. He had a great quality of life from that cake. But no, I mean, we were really good friends, and he even gave me a signed copy of a book that he wrote of the history of St. Thomas. We were good friends. I should pray to him, you know, pray for him more.
You should, because he was very instrumental in helping a lot of the children.
I think everybody should pray for Father Rassley.
And for priests in general, because they are really under attack
Scrutiny.
in this time right now.
Right. So, but, yeah, no, he was such a great priest. I love that guy. So, kind of to wrap things up a little bit, because it's been almost 2 hours.
What?
I mean,
I'm sorry.
I'm not surprised. I mean, we have conversations like this all the time. So there were 2 things that I wanted to do. First of all, how am I doing as a mom now that you can see me as a mom? Like,
you know, I'm not going to judge you as a mom. I can't judge you as a mom because I haven't had a back-to-back baby. And I haven't had the health issues that you have had. But I think that you are an amazing parent. I'm so proud of you and Teddy. And I'm so grateful to God that in his providence, he has Teddy working for Providence,
Yeah.
being home and being available to help you. I don't think that could have happened. And you would thrive as a family, because I see you thriving as a family. But you do it together as a team. And I see you loving your children and trying so hard. And don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I want you to know, is don't be so hard on yourself as a parent, because there was only one perfect parent.
Yeah.
And that was it.
It's
and
hard.
so we beat each other, and I forget what kind of a parent I was. I hear you kids talking about different stories and remembering things, good and bad. And when you remember the good things, you guys remember the good things. I had forgotten a lot. A lot is compartmentalized because I keep moving forward. I'm like a shark moving forward. And when you guys reflect on the good things, I think, okay, I wasn't so bad.
No, you weren't.
I wasn't so bad.
I think in the moment, because I remember the chaos of it, when we were growing up, it's really easy to focus on the bad. Mm-hmm. Because that's what sticks out the most, because I think we acknowledge our failures more than we acknowledge our successes a lot of times. And I mean, I do that all the time with Gianna and Finnegan. It's so hard to, moms that are out there with toddlers, it's dang near impossible to reason with them,
You can't. No.
And so it's like, I'm trying
and then they get to be a teenager, and then you can't reason with them either.
Yeah, so I'm just like trying to adjust, and Gianna is so smart, sometimes I think I expect too much of her. So it's good to hear, from you that I'm doing an okay job. And
not just okay, you're doing a very good job.
I'm glad.
And the truth of the matter is, it's a battle of wills.
Yeah.
And sometimes your will isn't always going to be the winner. I can remember when you were 3 months old and you just cried. I don't remember what it was that set you off. It was in the afternoon, and I laid you on the bed. I had done everything to make you happy. And at that moment, I realized I can't. I just shook my hands and I laid you on the bed and I said, "What do you want, kid?" And I was kind of like at my wit's end.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know what to do to make you happy. And you stopped and you looked at me and I thought, okay, well, you win. You win this. You win this argument. I can't fix it.
That's Gianna.
You broke me to tears, that I just figured, I couldn't do everything to make you happy. And that's the most humbling thing as a parent, to realize you are not responsible 100% for your kids' happiness.
Yeah.
For their successes or their failures, you are not 100% responsible.
Right.
That's what God has given us a free will for. Your job is to guide, keep them safe, clothe them, feed them, shelter them, point them in the direction. And if they choose to go elsewhere, that's on them. Yeah. If you've done your best, it's on them.
What advice would you have for younger moms that are going? I know that you're not done with your parenting journey yet, but like, what from what you've dealt with like raising us kids, what advice would you have given to your younger self, I guess I should say?
Do not ever give your kid a phone.
Yeah.
Don't ever give your kid a phone. There is no reason for them to have a phone. There's a home phone on the wall for emergencies. I grew up without a phone. Don't ever give them a phone.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And always have knowledge of what technology and the dangers of technology before they come.
Yeah.
You have to be smarter than your kids as far as technology is concerned. And that's very challenging because I am just not there. I'm not on social media, so I can't monitor. I admire parents who have that technology and understand it. It's almost passed me by at this point. And so I have told my children, I have put up as many barriers and buffers, but it's an unnecessary evil. The phone is not necessary.
Well, and, Teddy and I raising the kids in a technological age, because, I'm not, I grew up in the internet age, not to the point where, like, I had iPads or anything. Like, we had the computer, it was in the early 2000s, but I can see a huge difference in how I was raised compared to Gianna and Finnegan. Not that I'm like doing something detrimental for them, but it's like screens are way more prevalent than, like, for me, it was a treat to play a video game on a computer with a floppy disk.
I know.
I remember we had a floppy disk of a game, and I'd be like, Dad, can you put it in? And it was a giant box computer, and it would take forever for it to load, but we were so excited that we were going to play a game online. It was amazing. And then I can just pull up Bluey on my phone for Gianna in like a second.
And it's a terrifying thing that becomes your go-to to settle them down, and they become used to it. In fact, when I see her, she wants me to show her the pictures on the phone.
Yeah.
I show her pictures of the babies for her and Finnegan.
And her videos.
I try to keep it to that.
Yeah.
Rather than anything else, so that she's just seeing, it's like looking through a photo album for her. Mm-hmm. But
I do that too.
It's
crazy. It's
how
crazy.
Information and disinformation is so hard to distinguish, and it's so readily available.
Right.
When I was younger, my parents had the ability to shut off the TV and say, you can't watch TV, and we didn't.
Yeah. We don't have a
That was
TV
it.
in our place. Like, I just have her watch it on my phone.
They
but I'm
had
with her all
absolute
the time.
control over what information we accessed.
Yeah.
What we had access to, and they were able to form us. And that doesn't mean that they didn't discuss world events and things that were going on. Mm-hmm. And I had more control when you and Eliana were younger, but it's important that you don't shelter your children to a certain extent, because once they get to the real world, let me tell you, it is terrifying. And I remember back when I went to Santa Barbara, and I was oblivious to a lot of things that were going on.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, it was good, because then I didn't have to make a choice.
Yeah.
But I was very naive.
Yeah. Wow.
And my transition to Rosemary was a blessing.
Yeah. I think God puts pathways in our life that kind of keep us on the straight and narrow. But
so one of the things we forgot to do was start this with a prayer for mothers that I had recommended.
Oh, that's right. I did a holy hour.
Yes, and that's important. I think holy hour is very important.
Yeah.
That's something Daddy did. He
Good.
started us going to holy hours with Granny. But I think we should pray for mothers, all expectant mothers, our mothers that are living and dead. Mm-hmm. And we should embrace, and if you haven't talked to your mom, call your mom and thank her, at least for the gift of life.
Yeah.
Whether you feel she was a good mother or not, thank her for being your mother.
Yeah. Well, what my last question is, and I'm going to ask every gal that comes on here, did you become more like your mom when you became a mom?
Yes, I feel like I was nurturing like her. I embraced motherhood the minute I became pregnant and was able to have a baby.
Yeah. Well, thanks
And
for
yes,
my life.
I did. Yeah, I did. I became, and even having my mom involved in your life added this extra layer of love.
Yeah, no, I do feel that with Granny. And obviously I have a different relationship with Gran than you and your siblings have, but I'm so thankful that I have a relationship with both my grandmothers, even though I don't live close to Dad's mom. I still feel very close to her. I duo call her all the time.
Yeah. And she has a lot of wisdom and nurturing to give to you. She prays for all of her grandchildren.
Yeah. So it's really, I think, and this is not in a feminist sense, but I think that it's important that women really support each other, because it's hard. It's really hard.
Do you know, I was told by my friend who's Ukrainian that they have, in March, they have, of course, Women's Day. Mm-hmm. The feminists go run with it. But in Ukraine, it's almost like their Valentine's Day, that they treat the girls and they give respect to the women in their lives. Yeah.
Maybe we should adopt that. Yeah, I definitely feel that much more keenly now that I'm a mom.
Are you less critical of me now?
Oh yeah. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The
siblings that I have in my family who haven't had children are far more critical, and
I think that's for anybody though.
I think it is for anybody.
And for any circumstance too. I mean, you could be super critical of someone that you haven't walked in their shoes. And that's another thing that I was hoping for this podcast, was that we all see that we have the same goal to raise our kids, and even though we're not walking the same journey, we at least have that understanding that, we're we're trying to do the same exact thing. And so any contention that you have towards one another, I hope can be diminished a little bit, because you realize, they're doing their darndest also,
And we got to help each other up.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't think I could have thrived without you and without my mother-in-law Rosie, like and all the women that have surrounded us and just like helped us so much with this, because it's freaking hard to have two under two.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm about ready to pull my hair out half the time, but I know that there's support, and that has been what has gotten me through it, is knowing, and it's a generational thing. Like if Gianna has kids, I'm going to be there as much as I can for her, and I hope that love waterfalls through the generations. And so that's why
legacy.
Right. But the main legacy is Catholicism, teaching them the truth.
Yeah.
That's the huge legacy that we should all be passing down.
Well, one of the reasons that I felt that Daddy was worth investing in when I met him is there was a picture of his uncles who were all, it was a black and white picture. It was beautiful. They were dressed as altar server in the traditional rite, of course, because it was before Vatican II. And it was such a beautiful picture of these pious boys dressed as altar servers. And I noticed that right away. I zeroed in on that on the table.
And we still have it.
And I just thought, there's a legacy there. There's a richness here.
Well, in going through our genealogy, I mean, I don't know if all these people were Catholic or not, but I can tell that there was something worth passing down.
Yeah.
In any aspect. And for us, it's Catholicism, you know, and so raising your kids right. There was a quote, I think it was from Chesterton, where it's like, a mother forming one mind can make or break a society.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's profound.
And that is so much pressure. But God's going to give you that grace. And I feel that very intensely, that grace. And yeah, it's a hard walk, but it's a good one.
But it's worth it.
Yeah.
It is worth it.
Yeah.
Tell me that when they're teenagers, though.
No. No, I will.
My teenagers are good, though.
No,
I have
they
to
are.
say, they're
I
wonderful
love
kids.
the kids. They're great.
They've got a great sense
Ella's
of humor.
so great with Gianna. It's so funny. Like when we pull up to your house, Gianna first of all knows that we're at your house, so she goes, and she gets super excited, and then Ella runs out and grabs her, and she just runs
that.
in. And then Emmett is so funny with the kids because he goes like, "Hello," and goes up to them and like does little voices. And Gianna and Finnegan feel that. I can tell just in how
they have that love from and you know, you think about them coming home from school, and they look forward to seeing those babies.
Yeah.
It's a little joy.
And the babies do too. I mean, we pull up and they know exactly where they are. And they actually radiate that love too. Gianna, I was putting her to bed last night, and I was saying her prayers. I do a Hail Mary and a Guardian Angel prayer with her, and I hold her. And she kissed me on the nose twice. And I was like, my heart exploded. Like it was amazing. Just those little moments, I just love them. But no, she definitely she gives the love that she's given as well. Like she gives it off also. And I mean, she was kind of a little stink last night saying no, Mom.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like a picture of my future.
Kind of get used to it.
Yeah. So
let's say a prayer for all the moms.
Should we do a Hail Mary? I mean, Mary's the best mother.
Yeah.
So, all right. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Please help all mothers in all of their walks of life to be advocates for their children and to teach them properly, to form good and stalwart kids and help them to stay out of sin, stay out of trouble, and to be safe, and help moms to heal from all of the suffering that they go through and any trials and any trauma that they have. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Sorrowful Mother, pray for us. Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Amen. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I'm hoping to post once a week. It's not going to be a
This
specific
is really
day.
long. This was long.
I know. We had a
I
lot
gotta
to
go make
talk
dinner
about.
for Dad.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I just want to sign out really quick. I'll be posting once a week. Not going to be specific days because moms have different schedules, but make sure to subscribe. Make sure to listen up. Like check Spotify and yeah. Anyway, and contact me. There should be comments. Contact me if you want to be interviewed. So,
God bless.
God bless.